First of all, thank you so much for coming this evening. Tonight, we're going to talk about the difference between addendums and amendments and disclosure. I know it's a very exciting topic, and I know y'all are just ready to jump in. And I hope that I can teach you what the difference is between the three. We are going to start with amendments. Amendments provide any changes to previously agreed upon terms and conditions of a purchase and sale agreement. What this means is after you have an executed contract, and typically it happens during the option period, if something needs to change to the contract, you're going to use an amendment. And the easy way to remember an amendment versus an addendum is that an amendment amends the contract. It changes the contract. So basically, typically during the option period, it's going to, the price could very well change or repairs could be requested. I can't tell y'all how many times I get a contract that's already been executed, and then the agent wants to make changes, which is just fine, but they go to the original contract, they strike through, and then they get it initialed, and that's not legally how we're supposed to do it. We need to use an amendment to change the contract. Again, it's drawn up after a contract has been executed, and it's going to change the terms of the contract, such as the sales price, requested repairs, closing dates, etc. Now, amendment, if there is a change to the contract, you will use an amendment, and all parties are going to have to sign that amendment acknowledging the change to the contract. This is the amendment that we use to amend the contract. Up here is where if you were going to change the sales price. Here, if you were going to request repairs to the home, and a lot of times we do get repairs that are more, that they just don't fit in that small space. So what I do is I will put C Exhibit A, and then on a separate piece of paper, I will put Exhibit A, requested repairs for property 1234 Happy Place. Here, number 3 is when we're changing the closing date, because God knows that does happen a lot. Let's see. And then if you need to extend your option period, you can use the amendment as well. One thing I want y'all to be really careful about is this other modifications. You have to be very careful how you word everything, because as Rick Rogers will tell you, we are not attorneys. We do not want to be seen as practicing law. So if you have any questions about other modifications and the wording on that, I highly recommend that you speak to your mentor about that, because we're more than happy to help you. Okay, now an addendum. Addendum is a document that is attached to and made part of the original contract. So it is a part of the contract. So if it helps you kind of remember, you are adding to the contract. Whereas an amendment is amending the contract and changing the contract. Some examples of addendums. You've seen them. You've got your HOA addendum that notifies everybody that the home is in an HOA. You've got your lead-based paint addendum that notifies everybody that the house was built before 1978, and we do have to disclose that. And I will stress to you the importance of a lead-based paint addendum. If you fail, excuse me, to provide that to the buyer, as well as the lead-based paint pamphlet, that is one of the quickest ways you can lose your license. So always, always, always check to make sure if the house was built before 1978 that you have included it. Disclosures. Disclosures are used when additional information about the transaction is required, such as a seller's disclosure. You have to disclose to the buyer the condition of the home. And when I say you, I mean the sellers, of course. Some other examples of disclosures is an intermediary notice. Let's say, we happen to sell a home that is one of our listings, which is great. Everybody's happy. It's going to be a smooth transaction because everybody at Texas United is such professionals that we're just going to get everything done and head to closing, and we've got all happy clients. Also, you have to notice that if you are buying a home, you have to disclose that you are the buyer or the seller in a transaction. That is super important. That is also another way to lose your license if you do not do that. Okay. One thing about an intermediary position is our broker does allow us to represent just one party. And in this case, it is on a lease. So let's say we've got a lease house, and we're lucky enough to get our tenant, and the landlord, Mr. Picky, he does finally approve them. We don't have to split our commission. We can get both sides of the commission as long as we disclose the following. And I know it's really hard for y'all to see, but down here where this arrow is, it says listing agent represents landlord and tenant chooses to represent themselves. So in this particular case, we're representing the landlord and the tenants are choosing to represent themselves. This also Rick is going to require that you put it in the special provisions of the lease. Okay, so in conclusion, amendments are going to change the terms of an agreed upon contract. So when you have an executed contract, you're not going to go back to that contract and make changes to it. You're not going to strike out or add a different price. You're going to use an amendment. An addendum is part of the original contract. Also, just rule of thumb is, if you'll just remember, added addendum, and it's part of the original contract. Disclosures, they're used to provide important information that must be disclosed regarding the property and other items, such as intermediary relationships, seller's disclosure, if an agent is the buyer. Okay, guys, I'm going to unmute you and let me know who has any questions. Was I clear as mud?
Yes.
Did you understand?
Yes.
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did.
I have a question though,
Yes, ma'am.
regarding the form that you showed that it was too small that we could not read it, where
Oh,
the
yes.
red arrow was.
Yeah,
Was
that's
the IABS.
that's the IABS.
Yeah, and but we were talking about intermediary.
Yes, we were. And what you've got to do is you've got to do a regular IABS like you would for any transaction.
Yeah.
But if you will add this verbiage right here that says listing agent represents landlord and tenant chooses to represent themselves, if you will add that verbiage just above where Texas United Realty is,
Yeah.
keep that in a file so you always know where it's at. So you don't have to recreate it every single time. I've got this in my file folder that says IABS tenant. I also have the same thing for IABS seller. You know, because sometimes the seller doesn't want you to represent them and you just represent the buyer or vice versa. So you've got to have this verbiage in here and then you're fine.
But that doesn't have to do anything with the intermediary.
No, you are representing just the tenant in this
Yeah.
case.
Okay. All right then. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I highlighted mine on my IPS for one of my contracts, and Rick called me and said, hey, how'd you do that? And he liked it because it stood out.
Yes, I think that is a terrific idea. Definitely. So I can send you mine and you'll show me how to highlight it. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I don't know if I can highlight somebody else's, but I just used the little highlighting tool in my
Yes.
computer.
No, I know.
Yeah,
how to
he
use
thought it was great. You know,
Yeah,
he said the more prominent you make it, it
Absolutely.
keeps somebody from saying, I didn't see it. Yeah.
Exactly. And I have to agree that this, you know, nobody reads this little fine print. So yes, I think that is a super duper idea. And I'm going to do that tonight. Does anybody else have any questions?
My question about this is the first time I hear that such an importance on that those two lines there. Why is it so important to highlight that specific?
That is for legal reasons.
Yeah, but if you're representing the buyer, you're representing the buyer. You have an exclusive agreement to represent the buyer.
Yes,
Or
but
if you're representing the seller, then you have the same, right? So,
yes, but we get into situations where say the seller doesn't want to be represented, but he's willing to pay 6%, which doesn't happen very often. A lot of times they'll renegotiate the commission because you're only representing the buyer, but you will have a buyer rep agreement with your client, but you have to make it clear in the contract and on the IABS of who you represent. And
yes.
right there, it says, we do not represent the seller. We only represent the buyer in this transaction, and the seller chooses to represent themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. So do y'all understand the basic differences between an amendment and an addendum?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I have got some extra time. If there is anything else that y'all would like to discuss, I'd be more than happy to share with you.
I got a question. Who is this that's teaching the class? I like to write that on the paper.
I'm Stacy Foster.
Okay, I knew I recognized the voice. It just didn't tell me who it was. So, okay, thank you.
I have a question. Okay, so on that amendment in that modification area, you said be extra careful with what kind of information you put there.
Yeah.
What would be an example of something that would be put there? Because I'm always kind of confused with that area.
You have to put facts.
Okay.
You cannot put in the event that the buyer gets pregnant and walks away from this deal, then you will pay us such and such amount.
Okay.
That's not, those are not facts.
Okay.
If you get into a weird situation, and God knows that we do, and you're not quite sure how to put the verbiage in there, you can do one of two things. You can talk to your mentor and see if we can figure out how to turn that into a fact, or we may even refer you to an attorney.
Okay.
If it gets that complicated.
Okay.
You know, hopefully it doesn't get that complicated, but it's, God knows it certainly can.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. For those of you that were not on the call a couple of weeks ago, is anybody interested in learning how to do Facebook posts really quick?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. If you are,
Yes, for sure.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if and you don't have to stay otherwise, but I will show you real quick how to do that. So let me hold on just a second. Okay. I'm going to stop recording and thank you all for coming.